As you see, our board is becoming the art wall for today. So let's keep that going. Expressions of what you're hearing. So this is the last session, and essentially we have two segments to this last session to kind of wrap up and talk about where we're going from here. First, I'll give an overview of what's in a white paper that we have drafted. And then second, we will bring up a group of panelists to have a little bit of a discussion, hopefully to stimulate with the audience maybe some convergence about areas that we are certain need to be focused on, but also to encourage, we're very early in this process, so open areas which still need to be addressed, because we certainly are not done with kind of the brainstorming, or what did somebody say, the ideation phase. Okay, so let me do the presentation first, and then we'll invite the panelists up. Okay, so one of the things that we think would be valuable to offer to the community is a perspective on smart cities from a spatial information, open standards. How can my smart city make use of open standards that give spatial information advantages to my city? And so with that in mind, one of the things we did was, first off, where are the other standards developing organizations at in terms of smart cities? There's been a lot of activities in SDOs kind of to survey, brainstorm, essentially what we're doing here in their domains, whether it's in a broader domain of JTC1, the ITU, you can see a lot of the names up here, BSI we've referenced before, German standards, and others. There's lots of others. Our particular take is that we should bring a spatial information focus to those set of standards, and then be able to take our viewpoint to those groups. For example, JTC1 just reestablished the working group, the special group, I forget what the SG stands for, SMART group, probably. Nah, probably not. SG1 on smart cities. They just reestablished that. They're going to be calling for inputs, meeting in March, pull that together in Beijing, and what do we have to offer? So let's see if we can pull something together. So as far as some themes overall about with respect to smart cities, and smart cities are high density generators of innovation and information. You've seen this kind of diagram that Steve created, I think he created, right? Yeah, I attributed to it, I was hoping that's right. But not only is it a picture of a city and information, but all that information is located somewhere. And you certainly heard Steve's inspiring talk about, everything is somewhere. And so that information and innovation generation is a key about smart cities. Location information is a major enabler of smart city technology benefits. We certainly believe that, but we need to be able to put together a convincing case that location is relevant to the broader activities that are working on smart cities. We'll show up and we'll say location's important, and they'll say, nah, it's no different than any other kind of information. No, it's a real organizing principle that you can make use of. A principle here, benefits of the smart technology must be judged by benefits to the residents and the decision makers, and essentially those folks that live in cities. How do we make use of the indicators to assess those benefits? Reuse and repurpose is vital to urban resilience. So I love the diagram that Mishi showed, that in this kind of third phase, that's a key aspect of urban city environments is its resilience. We're addressing, for example, resilience to climate change in our current test bed for cities and flood inundation and the like. And in the end, open standards are needed for interoperability, efficiency, application, innovation, cost effectiveness. So some major themes that just kind of set the stage for what we're doing. But what's so smart about smart cities then? We talk about smart cities. We've questioned the city part. Karsten gave us a good kind of Platonic elements, Greek elements of cities. I love that. That was great. You know, the 4 things: earth, wind, fire. This is again the BSI, British Standards Institute. What does the I stand for?
Institution.
Institution, it is, okay. From their vocabulary document, it's good because it focuses on that integration of all those pieces that come together on the benefit of citizens. But you know, where do we locate those smarts? Where is the intelligence in the smart city? Where is that all of that sensing come together in decisions and that wisdom and the like that was talked about in Rich's presentation? Where is that located? In part, you know, you can see that in the emergency response centers. A lot of smart city activities have focused on having emergency response centers, having control facilities that are centrally managed. All of the information comes in to those centrally managed facilities. Decisions are made on behalf of the citizens, and essentially we're taking care of the citizens. There is certainly that need for government to take care of the citizens. What we haven't emphasized as much in discussion so far is that the intelligence, the smarts, is also in the residents of the smart cities. And so how do we get open information to those residents to make better quality decisions that are going to affect their way of life? You know, put the intelligence, trust that intelligence that's in the citizens of the city, and give them the information they need for that individual and collective decision making. And so you'll see as we move forward, both of those themes of smarts in cities are emphasized in this draft architecture that we have. Another theme is to kind of think about, you know, the history of urban planning, the history of the development of our cities, and in particular one theme is this Death and Life of Great American Cities. Well, that was Great American Cities. Was Jane Jacobs was the author that really produced a revolution in urban planning back in the 60s. This is back when the choice was, do you want to keep your city or do you want to have an interstate cut through the middle of it? And Jane Jacobs was the person saying, nah, it doesn't make any sense to me to put an interstate in my city to save it. And so how do we, you know, take account of the people that are living in cities, provide, you know, cities have the capability of providing something for everybody, and because and only when they are created everybody. So get that participative contribution. And so a theme to keep in mind as we're moving now with smart cities is that same kind of urban planning. And more recently, there's a gentleman, Jean Gehl, J-E-H-L. He's actually from Rotterdam, I think, and has done a lot of studies about open spaces in cities as really bringing quality of life to cities. He's a physical architect. He's an architect that builds buildings and cities and that kind of thing. But his remembrance of Jane Jacobs is that she would encourage us to go out there and see what works and doesn't work, learn from reality, see how people actually use the spaces and learn from that. So this kind of points to, I think, a principle we already understand in standards development, that it's participative and it's running code wins, essentially. So, you know, open information so that you can make those decisions in a distributed fashion. People have that information. Iterative development by getting out and being involved in cities, certainly a theme that we have in the interoperability program of interoperability, iterative development, and then look at the indicators of what's important to determine, you know, how to assess how to move forward and the like. This is kind of the first set of information that goes into the architecture that we're laying out. This is the principles and the policies and the themes that drive the enterprise of a smart city. What is the goals of the architecture that we want to have? So I'm beginning to frame out an architecture based upon the viewpoints that we're familiar with from what's called the RMODP. This is an architecture approach for an information system. And so based upon these patterns of information system development, how does it apply in this case where the information system is a smart city? And so this is an existing ISO standard, and what I'm laying out is in these 4 categories: enterprise, information services deployment. The principle from architecture, Christopher Alexander and the like, is separation of concerns, pattern language, look at the viewpoints independently and figure out how we can meet the objectives in each of those viewpoints. So, enterprise viewpoint, again, to give you a little sense of that, clearly the indicators conversation that we had this morning, the set of indicators that comes from ISO 37120, that Mishi gave us a good overview this morning. There was 100 total, set down to 34 core indicators. 46 core indicators. And they're all good, but what does it matter with respect to spatial information? Which of those indicators in this set of 46 is most relevant, or that we can, from a spatial information point of view, bring most benefit to? And so I've pulled out a few of those and have begun to use those to structure the architecture, structure the components that will inform how we improve on these indicators. So here's 3 of them. One is in the category of recreation. There's an indicator called outdoor recreation space. This gets back to the quality of life that Jane Gall, architect, that really worked with Amsterdam and New York City and now Christchurch on the development of outdoor recreation spaces as a real measure of the quality of life for participants. I mean, look at this plaza that's right out here in front of us on the side. To walk around and feel that space is a very significant aspect of working and living in a city. So how do you measure, in terms of an indicator, the square meters of public outdoor recreation space? I actually think public indoor recreation space ought to probably be part of that indicator as well. It's still public, it may be indoor, but it's a recreation space that can be used for that same purpose. Second one, energy indicator, renewable energy sources. One of those indicators is the percentage of total energy derived from renewable sources as a share of the city's total energy consumption. We'll see a specific example of how spatial information City GML has and can help us assess this indicator. Then the environmental indicator of noise pollution. Again, we have examples in history, implementations that already exist that we can bring to making the measurements and the predictions about that indicator as well, noise pollution. So I pulled out those 3 as indicative or examples of what we might do. Also in this enterprise viewpoint is some list of application areas. And every SDO has a similar list of applications that looks something like this, you know. What makes up a smart city? Well, it's smart energy, it's smart intelligent transportation, buildings, public safety, and, you know, so I don't know if this isn't the right list. There is no right list. The important thing is to have kind of a controlled list that you can have a discussion around with other organizations to establish that communication. So that's a fair thing. And then lastly, in the enterprise components is to begin to establish a set of components at an enterprise level that describe the information system that you're going to build and detail and the like. And it should be something that's somewhat, you know, understandable. And this is actually on, you know, the back of your flyer now. But each of the SDOs have a very similar diagram that starts with a sensing layer. And for sure they have something like sensor networks or sensor webs. More about the sensor networks than the sensor webs, indicating a level of intelligence in the web environment that, for example, sensor web enablement, you know, we're kind of unique in that we have brought that level of networks up to sensor webs, and we can bring that amount. Very little discussion in the other SDOs about crowdsourcing, whether it's from phones, wearables, all the devices that, you know, Steve's talking about is embedded sensors in everything, and gosh, I don't know how many things I want measured. Maybe more than we're going to get. But so the sensing layer and crowdsourcing and the like. Then there's something like a data layer where there's a variety of data stores that are available. These are actually identified in the, most of this comes from the ITU Smart Cities document that is produced. I don't think I changed any of those databases or not. But they actually have a geospatial data one, population, economic, enterprise, and other data. And so providing data access to that is a key thing. The business layer on top of that, you know, the data is never the way the user needs it. There needs to be some transformation. So analytics and models, visualization and decision support, catalogs and semantics. And then the application layer, that same list that we just saw on the previous page is now shown here at the application layer. Is this the right list? You know, it's an evolving set. There's a couple of generic things that go across the side. Cloud hosting is, you know, is a resource that goes across these, and then security system across them as well is in particular already called out in the ITU version of this. But if we don't deliver this to the folks that are really the customers, then it doesn't matter. So who are the customers of smart cities, right? And I've broken it into three, and I'd be, you know, very interested in, you know, are these the right categories of actors that we're delivering smart information to? Elected officials, municipal employees, and the public. So, you know, that's something we can come back to, is that the right set? So that's kind of the enterprise viewpoint. The other two viewpoints I'll address are spatial information, the information viewpoint, and then the services viewpoint. A lot of this will look real familiar to OGC folks, and so we've got a set of standards that address spatial information and treats it as pervasive and primary, GML, city GML, indoor GML. We didn't talk about land XML, and we didn't talk about BIM so much here today, but those are clearly aspects of the information models that we need to have and be able to provide to the enterprise to solve those issues that we saw. A little emphasis on city GML maturity, both from a standards point of view, the direct standards itself, but also those extensions, as Carsten was pointing out. I've listed 3, Inspire, the Netherlands, and additional profiles underway. Implementation, Klaus Nagel gave me quite a bit of information about city GML maturity in terms of implementation. Won't go through a lot of that, but it's certainly a basis, a mature basis that we can bring to smart cities. The key thing, though, as information standards engineers, as our expertise and the like, is how do we bring a model like this, which is totally accurate and will confuse the heck out of city administrators, right? This is a great diagram from Carsten, and it represents the kinds of standards that are needed in order to solve this problem. Our challenge is, how do we hide this information from the folks that I listed at the top of the slide, of the enterprise viewpoint, the elected officials, the municipal employees, and the public. This has got to work, but it's got to be transparent to the people that we're delivering those activities to. Similar with BIM and you know, crossed SDOs, we need to do that interoperation. We need to do our homework about making sure the standards work together. So that's a cut at, you know, what are the information standards that are needed to make up the information viewpoint of the architecture. The other one then is the services viewpoint. And here we've got certainly OGC web services, we've got the sensor web enablement, we've got crowdsourcing, we've got processing on top of that using OGC standards and others, visualization, augmented reality, open data, and mobile are all the different kinds of standards. Again, all needed, but sure, we're not going to walk up to the people that are the customers and say, you know, you need to integrate GeoPackage with WCS. You know, that's just not the way to go to them. But we need this with the people that are implementing software to work in a seamless fashion in order to deliver those activities. So we put those together in a you know, similar kind of diagram, then sensor web enablement, group of access services, the processing services that go along with that, workflow and alerts. We don't write any standards on workflow and alerts, but we make use of them. Discovery services, all of that bringing into you know, the decision tools and applications. It's got to be seamlessly available to those folks. So. All right, so that's really the architecture. The application of that architecture then is, you know, how do we take those indicators that we started with in the beginning? You know, how do we take what we're going to measure to say whether we're having any success, and how do we apply those tools, the standards and the software that implements those standards, how do we put those together to show that we're actually making a difference? So in two slides, I've looked at these indicators and activities that we need to do. First off is, it's kind of implicit, but we need to maintain, each city needs to maintain a city model. They need to be able to have a spatial representation of the city. And in fact, there'll be some discussion later this week in a topic called Rapid Model Building for Venue Owners. This is something when we went to the In-Location Alliance and they said, well, we love those. How can we get one of those? And they said, well, what's it going to cost to do LiDAR and all the other stuff that goes into building a city model? And Steve Smith took this action to begin the discussion in OGC about how do we give a best practice white paper, whatever, about rapid model building for venue owners. So that's our response to maintaining a city model. Then, okay, so the indicators that I've spoken about, recreation space, so we could calculate those spaces easily. If you got your city model and you've got it in a WFS, you can make these kind of queries. You know, it's easy to do. You could look then at those recreation spaces to say how well are they used. So even going beyond the indicators, look at the moving features and how people move through these outdoor recreation spaces that are part of the indicator and give an assessment of that. Next indicator was the renewable energy sources. You may be familiar with the Solar Atlas of Berlin. That City of Berlin has a big city GML model. They applied that to a solar atlas. They're able to predict what is the available rooftops that can be used for renewable energy. And provide that to people to say, okay, it's your economic choice. You know, use this data, make a choice. Install solar panels. You'll save money. You'll help the environment. It's all good. So we increase this indicator of renewable energy sources. Lots of other things about BIM, geospatial smart meters for urban energy. I encourage you to go check out this Urban Sunshine project. I think it's FP7. I don't think it's Horizon 2020. I think it's an FP7 project in Europe called Sunshine. Jeff Zeiss has been quite the advocate of that, and it's very relevant to that indicator. Noise pollution. Again, we have existing previous experience predicting and visualizing, better said, visualizing the noise using this Inspire building model that I mentioned earlier. It's a city GML building model, and they've got the ability to show a graphic visualization to be able to assess this noise pollution indicator. One of two, sorry, two. I totally screwed that up. This is actually 2 of 2, so maybe there's conservation there somewhere. It adds up to 4, right? So sorry about that, some changes that I was going along. So I think we do need to address some other benefits of smart cities that spatial information brings. One is this emergency response, and we can bring a common operating picture, best practice to how to work with emergency responses. Urban Economics was a great paper about geospatial cyber infrastructure for examining the urban economic analysis and simulation, so that builds on a WPS that actually helps do that calculation. Big data analytics, certainly we saw that earlier with big data from cheap phones. Yeah, big data from cheap phones that Shibasaki-san Sensei showed us. There's also a great, if you're not familiar with Batty, I forget his first name, he's out of London. Michael Batty, right? He's written this, done a lot of work, and the book then is called New Science of Cities, but it treats this kind of lots of movement of lots of big data to do the analysis of cities. Crowdsourcing in VGI, sensor things, along with social media, WFS and SOS, we've done that. And then open data. So this gets us back to delivering data to citizens as a key aspect of what's important about smart cities, is giving them access to open data with spatial content so they can make decisions, build apps, and do things that we never dreamed of by making the data open. So we have some good experience of that. We ought to bring that to them. So let me kind of wrap up with 2 last things. You know, we've talked a lot about indicators. This is a problem that confounds me, and we've got these statistics that say more than half of humanity lives in urban centers right now, and this percentage is increasing. So urban population is more than half, and it's going to get bigger, right? More and more people, for whatever reason, the social trends and the like, are moving into cities. Cities are worse with respect to consumption of resources and producing population than people outside of. So for example, 2/3 of the globe's energy is consumed in cities. And so you actually have what appears to be, if we continue to increase the number of people living in cities, the amount of energy consumed is going to increase. To me, that, will this get worse as people move to cities, or will we make a difference in how cities operate? I mean, tell me I'm making some bad assumptions about statistics, but these, cities consume, they're not as efficient. And so how do we deal with that, with the kinds of technologies that we're bringing? So I look forward to comments during the, let me finish. So where do we go from here? Next steps. So aim to take this draft paper that you all now have and get comments, certainly from this room, also from the OGC membership in meetings later this week, and build on the white paper and get a consensus. Probably, it'll be like a discussion paper, and not a OGC position, but rather a useful piece of information to educate other SDOs. Is quite frankly what I hope to. And so that leads us to the second step: coordinate with the other SDOs, promote spatial and location standards in their architectures, find out what exists as far as OGC member implementations in smart cities. Use that database of implementations to go out and conduct testing, confirm the architecture and technologies, do pilots in a bunch of cities, OGC pilots in a bunch of cities that want to have smart city technology. So we need to structure how that's done so it gives the best advantage to our members to get familiar with the people that are running those cities as a precursor to then delivering what our members would deliver as part of a procurement after the pilot's over. And then deploy the architecture as policy in your smart city. Obviously I'm speaking then to decision makers in the city and the like, is a set of framework and the like. So that's what I've prepared. I would invite, let's see, maybe we'll do two things. Invite the panel to come up and take a few questions as the panel is coming up. Denise, I'm looking at you. Does that sound like a reasonable plan? Any comments about what I've presented then? Put it that way first. And Steve and Nobu, you all want to come up? Mishi, you want to start coming up for our panel? Karsten, you look like you wouldn't believe the numbers.
A thing I at least heard, I can't point you at any evidence, but that cities are actually more energy efficient than rural areas, which works roughly along the, it's a more Western world kind of view. If you live in a rural area, you take your car and drive 20 miles to the next supermarket, whilst cities have rapid mass transit systems and obviously clustering of living spaces. It just should be more energy efficient.
I hear what you're saying. That would have been my initial assumption, but if you look at where we're at, with cities consuming more percentage of the energy than they have percentage of the population, that's what's counterintuitive to cities should be less consumptive of energy. You'd expect that the percentage of energy would be less than the percentage of people that live in those cities. On a per capita basis, we're spending more energy in cities than we are elsewhere.
Is that because the developed world is at the moment larger? So the developed world has taken a larger portion through power, which has skewed those numbers. So the developing world has got more rural people, which doesn't.
Yeah, so, but isn't that the trend? If we're saying that people are going to be moved into cities, they're going to be moving into developed, I mean, city by definition is more developed than rural.
Yeah, true, as they develop the power go up, sure.
Say again?
As they develop the power go up, it's basically development most developed over whether they're in cities or not.
Yeah. So does that negate that concern?
No, I think it's still valid. It's just the numbers look wrong, but I think it's just a different skew.
Yeah, I would say it's something I don't understand enough, but it sure troubles me. Yeah. Great.
I guess the thing is that people that live in cities, they tend to be more consumers than people that live in rural areas. You get more options, you get more consumption of money, of services, of everything. Therefore, that number looks quite reasonable to me, to be honest. people that live outside cities, they just consume less products, less services because they get fewer options.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. But that means in the future we're going to be consuming more energy per person.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Any other? Yeah, sure.
You have also to consider when you speak about cities, complexity inside the city.
Yeah.
I mean, there is different urban form with different kind of uses. I mean, when you are considering individual houses, the consumption per square meter is much more higher than in the city center when you have more dense areas. So speaking about cities is also, it's a bit in simplified way. I mean, it's more complex than that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it goes back to that cities are the highest density innovation. Not only do you get more energy consumed per capita, you get more innovation per person in a city than you do rural. So that's a benefit, but you're still paying for it in terms of more energy. And what does that say about sustainability? Yeah.
Also, the lights in the city don't go out at night. I mean, the energy, I mean, even when people aren't active at night, maybe not major cities, but all the lights are still on. I mean, in a smart city, when the activity went down, the lights would go down.
I'd like to think smart cities will help us with this, that in fact, the per capita energy consumption will go down as smart city technology goes up. And that's what we hope, right? Okay, so that brings us really to kind of the last part of the day where we have an esteemed panel. I think we've all met except, well, no, Steve presented. No, Steve didn't present earlier. No. Why don't you introduce yourself, and then Nobu as well. Introduce yourselves. And in fact, if you want to have any kind of opening statement, Steve, you know, go ahead and make a comments or whatever you like there to start us off, to get us kind of going.